Welcome to the funnel. My name is John Shea, and I'm president of Alignment Group. This is episode 214 of the funnel. Why companies struggle to develop good sales managers. Before we begin, I want to tell you to head on over to alignment-group.com/the funnel. Hit the subscribe button, and we send you the show notes weekly. So you can take this podcast on the road with you, on your walks, in your car, while you're working out. You don't have to worry about writing down these pearls of wisdom. We'll send it to you weekly. Today's agenda: no program, hiring process, lack of training, trust bond. So let's talk about the program. Most companies I talk to have some level of a program for their sales reps. May not be perfect, but there's a way they hire, there's a way they train and develop for success. And some of those things are broken and have holes in them, and that's what I help them fix. But I rarely find a company that has a developed management program in place. Some of the larger organizations obviously do. I'm talking small to medium-sized businesses where I spend the vast majority of my time. So a small company with 3 reps or 4 reps that's decided it's time to hire that 5th rep, or it's time to hire that 5th rep and a manager, or I have 4 reps and I want a manager. I'm tired of managing them myself. There's no real program in place. They can just say, well, they didn't need one because they didn't have a manager before. Right. But I don't even think they think about it. They go through a couple of managers before we talk. And they're like, I can't get this to work. I have the sales side working. And that's really good because a lot of times the starting point with companies is the sales side because they can't get sales going because there's no program. Oftentimes we see companies that are pretty well-established, medium-sized businesses, maybe 20 to 40 million, 50 million, 30, 40 reps, number of sales managers, et cetera, but no real program for their managers. It's kind of a churn and burn type thing. Move up a sales rep into the management role. They do well for a while, or they fail. It doesn't matter. They move on. You bring in the next one. And their big push and their big statement is we develop and promote from within. Okay, but are you really developing them? And the reason they haven't been doing that is there is no formal program in place. They don't have a sales management hiring process. They don't have a program to transition sales reps into sales managers. So you've heard the whole story of companies making the mistake of converting their highest producing rep into a manager, and it's a failure on 2 fronts because you lose the revenue on the sales side and they're not a good manager. I get that. People make that mistake all the time because they make that assumption. But there are people who've transitioned out of sales roles into management roles and been successful. In spite of their companies in some cases due to the fact that they've had a program in place that supported their efforts. So how do you transition someone out of sales into management? Completely different roles, completely different mindset, a lot of different thinking involved. It can be done, but they need some guidance on making that move. What's the blueprint for success look like? How do we know we've reached success with our sales management program? What's the picture look like? We can lay out what success looks like for a company, right? And goals. And we can do that something as simple as revenue and profit. Build from there. We can say this is what success looks like. Do we do that for sales management? Oftentimes we don't see that. So that's why it's hard to develop good sales managers and keep them. And finally, the hiring process, right? Do we have a really good hiring process in place? And we're going to spend some time on that here coming up in the next section because I think that's foundational. Same as building your sales team. So let's jump into the hiring process. I help companies build hiring processes for sales managers and salespeople. There are some nuances to building a management hiring process versus a sales hiring process, but they're strikingly similar as well. Okay, there's a lot of similarities there. For a good hiring process for sales manager, you need a profile. You need to lay out that profile. What exactly do I want from them? What's the skills I'm looking for? What are the strengths I need from this person? What do they do well? In some cases, what are they going to need help with? But what we're trying to define is what that ideal sales manager looks like, what he or she looks like. Then we want to benchmark our candidates against that. And how do we do that? Through a good assessment. And we use the Objective Management Group assessment. That Objective Management Group assessment, we use different versions of it, right? The sales candidate assessment for sales candidates. There is one for sales managers and sales VPs of sales. There's assessments for your existing sales force. We believe in that product because it works. So we're benchmarking the manager against the ideal. Same as our hiring process. If you go back to our sales hiring process, go back in the 190s, listen to the six-step process, and start thinking about how that would apply to managers. It's the same thing. I want to bring in my pool of candidates. I want to get them past the first gate, right? Do they meet the minimal acceptable criteria of what we're looking for? I want to put them through the assessment. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Do I interview them? And then I start the interview process, reducing risk all along the way until I find the right candidate for the right role. Do I have a hiring process in place for managers? Most companies don't. So there's a failure on that part. It's the same mindset that people think with sales. Well, they have a great personality, they can sell. You know, if they display some basic level of leadership skill sets, we can turn them into a manager. Where they're the most vocal sales rep, they make a good manager. Without any real thought to the hiring process and what that looks like, or the program to ensure success. So that brings me to the training side of it. So if you don't have a program, more than likely you don't have training, or you have some format of training that you've implemented over the years. Or maybe it's a third-party program. And I'm talking sales management program. How do I teach my sales managers to be managers? Now, I've early days when I was made a manager, I did go away to a management training class. And I thought that was, and I'll mention it. It was years ago. It was Applied Concept, something like that. I went down to Miami. This was years and years ago. And I thought, wow, that's some pretty good stuff. But unfortunately for me and for the folks in the class, our company sent us to the training and just assumed that we would come out of that ready to manage. And that just doesn't work that way. You need the same kind of management training and development plan for sales managers that you have for sales reps. What does your training look like? I am a big believer, okay, in building out that roadmap for training, that roadmap for development, putting some context in place. In other words, we're training in our real world scenario, not some classroom somewhere with made up criteria and practicing our conversations about a fictitious company. It's about the company you work for. It's a slow, methodical process over time so the manager can absorb what's being taught to them. It's not a fire hose 1 week training class and then you're fully baked. So we build out the same roadmap, almost in the same, it is really the same way we do it for onboarding sales reps and getting sales reps prepared and letting them know that this is a career commitment or a lifetime commitment here, that we are committed to training and developing you for the remainder of your time here with our company. So it's not a one and done. Same with management. So what does that development plan look like? There really is no development plan. I don't see roadmaps. There's no mentor. There's no one to help them learn how to manage. Most of us get it through osmosis, right? Or we had a good manager or a good teacher somewhere in our lives, and we strive to be like them. And the really good people that do that really understand that there are good things to take away and there's things that you don't want to do that person did. But that's not, having to do that yourself is not a good thing. Where's the mentor program to help a manager be successful? Now, this is where I'm going to step outside the line and say, maybe you're a small company and you don't really have somebody to do that. Fine. How many groups do you belong to where you have peers that you meet with? I don't care if it's a local chamber of commerce, whatever group, peer group, business group you work with. How about having that discussion? Mentor, management type discussions, maybe bringing it outside the company. I know it's not contextual, but if you don't have it, you need to get some help for them. So figure out a way to do that. What's the criteria for success? Because you don't see that. I don't see it laid out for managers the way I see it laid out for salespeople. So there's a lot in this sort of training discussion that I'm having. What does that look like? But if you think back and you go back to podcasts I've done on onboarding and development and training of sales reps, and just take the word out sales rep and insert manager, it's the same thing. What does that look like? Of course, there's little tweaks and changes to it because you're training on different stuff. And how does it relate to what they do in context? Now you're going to say, well, a mentor outside the company isn't going to help with that. No, but people are people. And dealing with people in a one-on-one situation from a management perspective changes the conversation when you're talking about your business, but people are people. When you're managing them, it's very similar. So you can get away with that with a mentor program. Maybe not so much on the other end of it. For example, if you're dealing with a specific product or service and there's sales training and development that's required, you want to have contextual conversations around that. But you have people problems, and you will have people problems. They will bring their personal issues into the office with them. How do you manage through that? There's really good people out there that can help you manage that. So go back, listen to some of that stuff, and then substitute manager, and you get a real good feel for it. That right now, if you don't have a management program as strong as your sales rep program, you get a problem on your hands. And if you don't have either, well, you have two problems. I'm going to talk about this last one, and it might seem a little disjointed, but I think it's really important. And the reason I say it's disjointed because it's more advice on what you should be teaching your managers and what managers should do when they're in that first-time role. Because you see it all the time. I see this all the time, especially on sports teams, right? A new manager comes in and they want to set the tone. Sometimes they dump a player or make a big change to prove who's in charge, that sort of thing. That's all well and good on a sports team, if that's how you want to manage your team. But when you're talking about salespeople, you're talking about people who go out every day and risk their income with every conversation. Think about that. Every conversation they have with prospects, every decision they make on a daily basis has a direct impact to their income. How is that different than other jobs? Well, you know what? If you're in the accounting department and you make a mistake, no one's taking your money away from you. If you're in the accounting department and you're sick for a couple of days, you don't lose any money. If you're in the accounting department and someone you're dealing with has a bad day, like a prospect, that doesn't cost you any money. Obviously, if you're bad at your job, it's going to cost you your job. But you get the point. Every decision, everything you do directly impacts your income. So what do sales reps generally do when they meet new people or they have new programs in their company? The first thing to do is push back. The second thing to do is circle the wagons to protect what they have. It's natural. It's part of the program. I would expect nothing less. So an experienced manager knows how to break through that. An experienced manager can say, here's my track record of implementing changes with you, the company's track record, and here's our level of success. And the sales reps can look at it and make their own decisions. And in most cases, if there has been a historical level of success, they're going to trust what you bring to the table, the trust bond. So what's the most critical thing for managers to do when they're first starting out? It's to build the trust bond. It's that simple. And I think there are functional things that are put in place for managers. This is how you manage. This is how you do this. This is the HR rules. This is your team. This is your number you're responsible for. Here's the reports you get. Here's the tools you have. Good luck. What I would say the most important thing for a new sales manager to do with their team is to build that trust bond. Develop the relationships early. I've talked about this in the coaching and the development phases for managers. First of all, you need to figure out what you have on your team, not what somebody else tells you have. You need to figure that out. Sure, you can get solicit feedback. You want to get feedback. You want to look at the numbers. You want to look at the reports. But that's only part of the picture. You want to know who you're dealing with. What are they like? Not only on the sales side, but on the personality side. Quickly build relationships with them. Build that trust bond. You need to shift from me, if I'm a sales rep moving into a management role, to we. You're no longer on your own. So those relationships are critical. You don't need to be their best friend. I can tell you that. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about building a trusting relationship. They have to know you have their back. They have to know that you care about them, not only in a business context, but in a relationship. Personally, you're taking care of them. They want to know if there's a problem. You're not going to throw them under the bus to save yourself. It's the most important component to managing. Everything else moves from there. Because if you're being put into a new management role, you're going to want to implement changes, guaranteed. The company's going to want you to implement changes. You start implementing changes right away, you're going to find yourself in some epic battles. First things first, develop the relationship, build the team bond and the individual bond, mostly with you. I'd say the team stuff is important, but mostly with you. Quickly build that relationship so they begin to trust you as a person and they begin to like you as a person. Again, doesn't have to be best friends, but you represent leadership to them. You represent security. This person's going to take care of me. Now, if you've got somebody that's been through 20 managers and it's been one goofball after the next, you have a battle in front of you in terms of building that, because they're not going to buy what you're selling. So it's going to take some work. And understand that. Understand the context of where they're coming from when they're talking to you. Don't just get irritated and angry at it. I had a guy that I've worked with, and he's still with the company. He's been through a couple of buyouts. Highly successful, in the top 2 or 3 sales reps in the company's maintained some great contracts with clients for a very long time. Clients where decision makers have changed multiple times. Just a good rep. Trust no one. He trusts no one in leadership role because he's had so many managers and they've been failures one after the other. So it's hard for him. I was his manager. Took me a long time. We stayed together a while. And I took care of him. He took care of me. Held him accountable when he didn't do what he was supposed to do. Knew exactly where I stood business-wise. But also knew I would never, ever throw him under the bus for myself. So I built that trust bond. It took some time and it worked. And we drove higher revenues. Yay. It's not magic. So we'll leave it at that. Head on over to alignment-group.com, the funnel, subscribe. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Doing some cool stuff lately on the Facebook page, and we're trying to add to it. We just started reviewing sales movies, kind of a little bit different spin than what you see in podcasts or blogs, people's favorite sales movies. We do some of that, but I do provide some information and how it relates to what we're talking about and links and stuff. So check it out. Head on over to our Facebook page. We just started that in the last few weeks. You can contact me, Jay Shea, at alignment-group.com. You can find us at alignment-group.com. Some really cool stuff on our website. Check that out. As always, keep filling the funnel.